Good evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to your New Hampshire State House News Report. Let's begin. It was a busy day at the State House today. Here are four things you need to know that happened today at the State House. New Hampshire again consider death penalty repeal. Previous attempt vetoed by governor. Lawmakers in New Hampshire are again discussing whether to repeal the death penalty. Last year, Governor Chris Sununu vetoed a repeal bill, and an override attempt in the state Senate failed by 2 votes. Testimony on the bill, which would change the penalty for capital murder to life in prison without parole, included comments from two former state attorney generals on opposite sides of the issue. Former Attorney General Kelly Ayotte prosecuted the state's only death row inmate, Michael Addison, who was convicted in the 2006 murder of Manchester police officer Michael Briggs. We have a narrow statute, Ayotte said. We have several levels of review. The jury had to find unanimously 3 times in that case. Former Attorney General Philip McLaughlin said the death penalty can be dangerous. He highlighted the wrongful arrest of a man accused of murdering a Hopkinton girl in the 1990s. The real question at the end of the day is what is fair for society as a whole, he said. What is reasonable balance and equality? It's on the basic, not moral, that I oppose the Constitution of the death penalty. New Hampshire hasn't executed anyone since 1939. The governor is expected to veto any repeal bill that passes this session. Lawmakers would need a 2/3 majority in the House and Senate to override the veto. Your next story. Law enforcement officials call for changes to bail reform law. Police say dangerous people being released to community. Police and prosecutors are seeking sweeping changes to the state's 6-month-old bail reform law. But the new Senate Majority Leader said any problems with the law aren't the legislature's fault. New Hampshire lawmakers approved a bail reform law last session. Law enforcement officials said the case of Mark Dennis and Keene shows the problems they say the law introduced. In November, when Dennis was out on a personal recognition bail from a previous arrest, he stabbed a man, police said. Even though he was charged with being a felon in possession of a deadly weapon and second-degree assault and had clearly violated his original bail conditions, he was once again released under the new law 12 hours later. People just seem to be revolving right in and out, said Chief Andrew of the New Hampshire Association of Police Chiefs. In Bedford's police chief talked about cases where people assaulted police officers and they're released on personal recognition bail before the officer can change their uniform from the one that got ruined in the fight. Police and prosecutors testified Tuesday about several instances of potential dangerous offenders being arrested and rostered in and out of jail. Chief Andrew said his organization backs a bipartisan bill to reshape bail reform, in part by returning the evidentiary standard for holding an offender back to where it was before the law changed 6 months ago. We don't want to undermine the bail reform, but we want to fix the problem, said Senator Jeb Bradley, Republican of Wolfboro. Supporters said the change would leave intact the original intent of the bail reform to prevent low-income defendants from getting stuck in jail because they can't afford to get out. But the author of the reform law disagreed. Unfortunately, Senate Bill 91 is a gross overreaction to a problem that may or may not exist, said Buzz Scherer of University of New Hampshire of Law. Senate Majority Leader Dan Feltz has his own bill to do some cleanup of the new bail reform statute, but he said the law isn't the problem. It's not the legislature's fault if prosecutors don't argue their case, Feltz said. It's not the legislature's fault if some judges misinterpret it. Next story, move to change name of Columbus Day stalls in committee. Bill would rename day to Indigenous Peoples Day. New Hampshire will not change the name of Columbus Day after a bill to rename it Indigenous People Day didn't make it out of committee. A House committee voted to retain the bill Tuesday, meaning it will remain in committee until next year. Advocates said the historic Christopher Columbus was a far cry from the explorer portrayed in most textbooks, and they believe the current name of the holiday is offensive to Native Americans and minorities. Local indigenous people said they are disappointed in the vote. It's a process, but we did hear some very racist comments that are going to have to be worked out in committee, said Paul of the Chaskawak Band of the Pennacook and Bekai people. Some opponents of the name change said it would be an effort to Italian people. Lawmakers consider to protect New Hampshire's bees. Bill would restrict use of certain pesticides. Lawmakers in Concord are considering a bill aimed to protecting New Hampshire's pollinators. The measure would restrict the use of pesticides that are toxic to bees in the Granite State. More than 650 people have signed the petition to support the legislation. Members of the New Hampshire Save Our Pollinators Coalition plan to be at the State House during the discussion on Tuesday. And those are your 4 things you need to know from the New Hampshire State House that happened today. And I hope you enjoyed this news report. Have a great day, everyone. See you back here later on tomorrow with more news reports. Goodbye, everyone.